there. I've got a question for you. What do you think? Can nutrient deficiencies cause anxiety, depression, and really tank your mood and mental health? I found that there are certain imbalances in key nutrients that can have a really profound impact on your mood and your mental health. So let's unpack that a little bit today. I'm Michelle. I'm a functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner, a clinical herbalist, and a trauma informed professional. And I find that when it comes to mood, there are so many women walking around out there with anxiety, depression, feeling overwhelmed. And that means they're not able to show up in their life the way they want to. Maybe aren't moving forward in their career, or they're seeing that it's causing family problems, a lack of connection or intimacy, and impacting so many things in their life. And so including their health, right? In every other way. If we don't have that mental energy and motivation to take care of ourselves in the way we need to, it can really cause that downward spiral in our health. And so it's why I always start by addressing mood with the women that I work with. When I'm working with women to support their mood, I'm always looking at the root cause reasons for their low mood symptoms. And one of the top reasons that I find is this imbalance in nutrients, okay? And not just nutrient deficiencies. So we can have an imbalance, we can have an overload of certain nutrients. In fact, William Walsh in his book Nutrient Power says that an overload of certain nutrients actually can be more problematic in terms of mental health than a deficiency in certain nutrients. So we really want to look at these nutrients a little bit more closely, because these imbalances in particular that we're going to talk about today, they've been linked to depression, anxiety, panic attacks, ADHD, and even severe mental health issues like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. And so we want to make sure that this is something we're addressing for anyone who's really struggling with their mood, their energy, their focus. So we're going to talk about 3 nutrients today. There are so many that we could talk about, but we'll talk about 3 of the top ones that I always assess for with my clients, because again, they make such a big difference in our mood and mental health. So let's start with folate. We think of folate as this thing that helps our babies, right? It prevents spina bifida. We think of it in our leafy greens, and so good for us. And yet, folate can be a little bit tricky. When we have methylation issues, folate can actually cause some problems for some of us. So methylation, if you're familiar with that word, it's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to talk about methylation in another video because it has a profound effect on your mental health and your mood. But just know that if you are not methylating well, you may not respond to folate well. And we need to understand how you're methylating in order to know whether or not folate can actually help you with your depression and anxiety. Or for some people, it can actually make it much worse. I'm thinking of a client I worked with just recently. She was an undermethylator, and it's something I assess for in my clients. And she was using some supplements. So when I looked at the supplements she was taking, they contain folate. And I recommended she pause that folate. And she let me know a few days later, she emailed me to tell me that it had really shifted her symptoms of depression. So for undermethylators, that folate can be, again, really problematic. So we really want to assess for your methylation status. And again, I'm going to unpack this a little bit more in another video, but this is not the same as if you have an MTHFR genetic mutation, okay? That doesn't really tell us how you're methylating. It just tells us that you probably have some issues with methylation. So that's folate. Just know that it can actually be really helpful for some people who are overmethylators, and it can be really problematic for people who are undermethylators and make some of those low serotonin symptoms like depression worse. Let's talk about another nutrient. Let's look at zinc now. This one I think so many people think of zinc for immunity, right? It's something they take when they have a cold, but there's so much more that zinc does for us, including impacting our mood and mental health. And when we're low in zinc, it can impact our mental health because it interferes with our neurotransmitter function, right? It's a cofactor in the synthesis of many of our neurotransmitters that are those feel-good chemicals in the brain, like serotonin, dopamine, for instance. So when we're low in zinc, we may experience those symptoms of depression, anxiety, and ADHD. And it has a really intimate link, which I've talked about in some other videos, with copper, which is our third nutrient I want to unpack a little bit today. So copper is a really fascinating nutrient. We need copper, right? We need it for life. But if we have too much copper, this is actually a really common reason for specific mood issues like anxiety, anger or angry outbursts, easily overwhelmed, a low stress response. Maybe panic attacks, as an example, we can often relate to low copper symptoms. High copper symptoms. And copper is also implicated in postpartum depression. So if you've ever experienced that as a woman who's had a child, I would suspect excess copper is playing a role in your low mood symptoms. And important to know, copper and zinc balance each other in the body. And so often if we have too much copper, we may not have enough zinc and vice versa. So we want to make sure that we're not just looking at how much copper or how much zinc we have, but are they balanced? And so this is really important. Copper causes a lot of oxidative stress in the body. And so there's going to be a big need for antioxidant support. So those are some other nutrients we want to think about for supporting our mood. So how do we do that? How do we address these nutrient imbalances? Well, the first thing I do in working with clients to support their mood and mental health is to give them some assessments that really help me start to know where to look for specific imbalances. These specific nutrient imbalances show up with very specific symptoms. So I already mentioned some of those, like copper excess can lead to panic attacks, anxiety, angry outbursts. If someone tells me they've had postpartum depression in the past, I'm going to start kind of checking the boxes, right? That they may have a copper excess. And then ideally what we're going to do next is bring in some inexpensive, easy to do testing to see where these nutrient levels are at in the body. And again, it's a little bit tricky because it's not just about these nutrient levels in a good range, but are they balanced? And it depends as well on your methylation status, which we can also measure through testing. And once we've done that and we're able to pinpoint which nutrient imbalances a person has, we can often we need to bring in therapeutic doses of specific nutrients in order to shift that balance. And I see that with my clients really move the needle with things like anxiety, depression, even things they've experienced for a long time. So one of the first signs that you might have an imbalance in these micronutrients is your mood. And we can assess that with some simple assessments, and you can download my free mood fix assessment below in the comments and get started. So if we notice low serotonin, if we notice low dopamine, you'll also be able to look at GABA and endorphins. We can start suspecting that low nutrients are part of what's causing those symptoms for you and start working to address that. And again, I want to mention that ideally we'll do a little testing, some blood work in order to make sure these nutrients are actually out of balance instead of just bringing in supplements without really testing, because we don't want to make sure we're on the right track. I might have a client who has some symptoms of, anxiety or, panic attacks, but there are other nutrients, there are other causes to that. And so I want to make sure before I start addressing copper excess symptoms that we're on the right track and they actually have too much copper. So to get started, just download my serotonin or my mood fix assessment, where you can assess your serotonin, your dopamine, your GABA, and endorphin symptoms and start supporting that. And you can also find out more about how to work with me down below. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.